Hi folks, for this Walks with a Difference we're in the City of Leicester. If you're watching this from outside the UK, Leicestershire is the central county in England. And this story today is a little bit gruesome in many aspects, so if you're of a nervous disposition you might want to switch off now. We're in Wellington Street, named after the Duke of Wellington, famous for the Battle of Waterloo. And this story goes back to 1832. King William IV is on the throne. He's the king. And along Wellington Street, there's a young man called James Cook, who's 21, who runs a bookbinding business. He's got a small workshop just off Wellington Street, and it's above another man who runs a milk business, selling milk. Now, James Cook had purchased from a Mr Paas, who was a partner in a firm based in Holborn, London, some engraving materials for his bookbinding business. They were famous in that trade. And to the value of, I think, 20 shillings, which was quite a lot of money in those days. Now, Mr Paas hadn't yet been paid, so he informed Cook that he would be coming to Leicester to collect his payment. So on the 30th of May, 1832, Mr Paas arrives and stays at a coaching inn, which we'll talk about a bit later, makes his rounds on some payments and sees Cook and tells him to come back in the evening for the payment. In the interim, Cook says to his young boy that's working with him, who's 14, that he could take the rest of the day off. That surprised him because he knew how busy they were. And he later said that he did see Paas arrive at the business early in the morning. So Paas comes back to Cook sometime in the evening, and at some stage Cook must have paid him the 12 shillings because Paas signed a receipt to that effect, and it was found later on. But he also then murdered him, hit him over the head a number of times with a brass instrument used in the bookbinding, and killed him. Of course, now what to do? What to do with the body? Not easy to dispose of with no transportation. So he decides that he's going to cut him up and burn him on the fire. And that's what he sets about to do in the evening. This is a Wednesday evening. But he also, at some stage then, decides to go down to the local pub, the Flying Horse, have a game of skittles and have a few beers. And during that visit, he asked the landlord if he can give him change for a sovereign, which is quite a lot of money. And the landlord also saw that he had a silk purse, and in that purse was other coins, gold coins and notes, which surprised him because he knew that Cook, had some financial difficulties. So that was the first sign of troubles to come, so to speak. Anyway, Cook then leaves, goes back to his workshop. He then informed the wife of the milkman that not to be concerned, he'd be working there during the night, and if he saw lots of lights or heat, not to worry. Apparently in the bookbinding business then they needed heat to do the job, so that wasn't that unusual. He then carries on. 4:30 in the morning, the milkman gets up to go and milk his cows, which is a short way out of Leicester on the London road. And Cook sees him and says, he needs some fresh air. He's been working all night. He'll come with him, which he does. He then goes with the milkman, helps him round up his cows, helps with the milking, comes back, and then carries on in his workshop. His father turns up trying to see him because he didn't actually live there. This was just his workshop, but it's all closed up and there's nobody to be seen. So he's not sure where he is. We now move to Thursday, and Thursday evening, a fire is seen inside this workshop, and the local residents feel that the house is on fire. So one of them breaks in, and when they break in, they find a big lump of flesh burning on the fire, and also that some bricks have been taken out of the fireplace to make it actually a bigger area. They then send somebody to go and get Cook, who comes back very agitated that somebody's broken into his workshop. They've explained why. But one of the residents suggested that it looked like horse flesh, and I think Cook took that up. That, yeah, this was horse flesh. I was going to buy a dog. It didn't happen. I bought some horse meat, which went off purified, so I burnt it on the fire. So that was his initial story. But people were a little bit suspicious about that for whatever reason. Maybe his demeanour. Also that he put paper at the windows. That's the Holy Cross Catholic Church, built in the 1880s, by the way. So a local constable came. Now this is actually prior to the official launch of the Leicester Police that came in, I think, 1836, the City Police, and then the County Police a little bit later. But they had law enforcement officials. So this constable came, and he wasn't sure about this story, maybe because of the way Cook was. So what he did was he took the meat, well, not the meat, the flesh, back to his house to be examined next day. And he said to Cook that he'd have to come with him to the mayor for an explanation, but he couldn't find him. So he let Cook go on the basis of, he knew Cook, he was a man of good character, that he needed to come back the next day for an explanation of what was going on here. So the next morning, Cook doesn't show up. He's done a moonlight flip. The local surgeons examine this flesh and determine it's actually human flesh. So now a search goes on the premises, and they find a lot more, some actually hanging up inside a chimney waiting to be burnt. They find then more evidence such as bloodstained clothes, spectacles, I think another wallet or something with the name initial P on it. So the question then goes, well, who's this belong to? Who's missing? And it's quickly established Mr Paas has not turned back up at the Stag and Pheasant, the coaching inn. Cook's nowhere to be seen. So then a inquest is quickly held. I think on the 3rd of June, the inquest is held at a local pub in Market Street. I think that was a Dog and Gun, which then no longer exists. That turned into a hotel, and that subsequently is now shops. That building is still there as the old hotel building. So now the question is, where is Cook? But during the inquest, a man turns up from Loughborough that was a coachman that had been approached by Cook, and actually he bought some things from him because he was short of money, he said, and he was selling these things on the cheap. And from him, it was established that Cook was really on the way to Liverpool to catch the ship to take him to America. And it came out that that was one of his earlier ideas anyway. Now, where this building is on the right-hand side, that was the Flying Horse pub, or the site of the Flying Horse pub that Cook went to on the evening of the Wednesday, the 30th of May. So it's been established that it's likely that Cook is now fled to try to go to America. Liverpool was the place, of course, to sail from, where thousands of immigrants did, and it's also probably for boatmen, you pays your money and no questions asked. So one of the constables who knew Cook, Cummings, was sent up to Liverpool with some assistance to see if they could catch him. So they hired a boat. They waited on the Mersey. Now again, the ships, you had to go out by a small rowboat to the main ship to take the main ship over to America. They didn't dock in the actual port. So Cummings was waiting, and lo and behold, they see Cook, and they go after him within their boat. Cook then orders his boatman to take him back to shore to try and escape. But sort of the two boats come up against each other. Cook then jumps over the side, perhaps even to drown himself, but it's very shallow. He then pulls out of his pocket a filed glass and tries to drink that. But Cummings is on to him and actually knocks that off, and it disappears into the waters. So whether that was poison or maybe perhaps more laudanum or something like that. And Cook's then obviously arrested. He's then arranged to be brought back to Leicester by coach, because we're talking of coach and horses days rather than trains. And with 5 constables, he's brought back, and he arrives in Leicester in the evening, 10 o'clock at night, and there's a large crowd still to try and see him, because it's becoming an infamous case by this time. So as we walk through Leicester, we'll look at various sites, some associated with Cook and Mr Paas, and some not, but hopefully you might find of interest as well. So Cook is brought back to Leicester and going to be questioned about what has happened. During that time, he then initially says that, yes, he has killed Mr Paas, he admits it, but it wasn't done willfully. It was a situation where he'd given him the 12 shillings. Paas was angry with him and demanded the rest. And in the ensuing fight, Cook had killed him. Now, this is Leicester Town Hall, built in 1876. It's a grand Victorian building, as you can see. It was built on the site earlier of a cattle market was here. And it replaced a building we're going to visit, which was the Leicester Guildhall. Still being used today as the town hall. And in one corner, there is this memorial, which I guess not a lot of people, if you were questioning them, would know what this was about. But it's South Africa, 1899 to 1902. That's what we call the Boer War, when the British Empire was fighting the Boer farmers in South Africa. And this was a memorial open to the Leicestershire men, a lot of whom were in the Leicestershire Regiment, and they were involved in things like the Siege of Ladysmith and other actions. And on one of these monuments we'll see the word grief, and on the other we'll see the word war. And that sums up all wars, doesn't it? Because they're always full of grief caused by war. Okay, so we're moving on to the Town Hall Square, it's called, with this memorial. Sorry, not memorial, with this fountain. I think that was built 2 years later, opened 2 years later in 1878. It's a beautiful fountain. Now, you might be wondering why, there's not a lot of people about, considering it's a busy city. Well, that's because it's a Sunday morning. I deliberately filmed this on a Sunday so there'd be less traffic and less people, ultimately. So Cook is brought back to Leicester, he's questioned, he's then going to be charged with murder. One of the questions that comes up to him is, only part of the body is there, where is the rest of it? He insists that he's burnt it all. But there's some questions over that, because the surgeon said he couldn't have disposed of the skull, for example. But he insists that he has, and that's the story he sort of keeps to at this point in time. Nice fountain on a summer's day. Of course, this area's been seen of many things in history. The world wars, etc., will be announced. End of the wars from the steps of the town hall. Okay, the next place we're just looking at is just of interest on the way is, and that clock's not right, it's probably not been right for a very long time, is Leicester Market. Been a market here for 700 years, and at one stage it was the largest open market in Europe, but it's now they've decided to completely bring it up to present day standards That building in the background is what's called the Corn Exchange, built in 1850 for trading between the farmers. It's now a pub and a restaurant. I think it was a nightclub at one stage from memory. So part of Leicester Market is still open, a small part, but obviously they've got a major renovation going on, and this part, I'm not sure when that will open. So Cook is, I think by now he knows what his fate's going to be, and I guess you can guess what his fate's going to be, or part of it. But there's two parts to his fate, really, and it's the second part which becomes historically of interest over any other murders. This is Leicester Clock Tower, built in 1868, so again, long after our story. This is the centre of Leicester, the most famous central point. This used to be open to traffic. They've now made it purely a pedestrian area, which is a good idea as well. And we're going to be walking round to Humberston Gate. Now, Humberston Gate is where Mr Paas was staying at the Stag and Pheasant coaching inn. And as I mentioned, this is pre the railways. The railways came to Leicester at the end of 1832. There was a railway for the mines in the north of the county, but passenger transport didn't happen, I think, for a few years later. So if you were travelling around the country or travelling from London to Leicester, you'd come by coach and horses. So this was the main coach and horse establishment to stay in. They did services to, I think, daily services to Birmingham and other parts of the country. So it was a major place to stay, and that's why Paas was staying there. Ultimately, I think it changed over the years, and then in 1959 it was shut down and demolished for this centre called the Haymarket Centre, amongst a lot of other buildings. So the Haymarket was built mid-60s, I would say, when that all came about. Again, it's another pedestrian area. Again, fairly quiet because it's a Sunday morning. That tower there, which they retained, was part of a shopping centre, a large shopping centre called Lewis's, which was very well known in Leicester, of people of my generation, perhaps not the younger generation. It was really one of the first multi-stores. It was high-quality shopping centre, which they then demolished in probably the 80s or the 90s, but because it was a landmark, they kept that tower. Now, another tragic story associated with the Stag and Pheasant was that in 1943, in the early hours of the morning, a police constable walking along found a badly injured Canadian airman. He was then rushed to the Royal Infirmary, but unfortunately died. And he'd been out drinking with his mates, and they'd been further down the road. You can't see it here now. There used to be a building called the Palais de Danse, the local dance centre. He'd been down there. Then he met a young lady there. But what apparently had happened was he'd been out drinking. He probably had too much to drink. He'd come back to the Stag and Pheasant. His clothes were found in the room, so it looked like he'd probably gone for a breath of fresh air on the balcony and just toppled over. So it was a tragic accident. I think the coroner sort of wasn't too happy with how the police had investigated it. But again, it's the middle of the war, it's 1943, and it is most likely that it wasn't foul play, but it was probably just a tragic accident. Okay, so what we're going to be looking at in the next video is continuing the story, part 2, of what happens to James Cook and other sites associated with him. So hopefully you can join me for that part of the story, and I'll see you in part 2.